You mentioned 40 employees. I said 40 employees and growing. That growth was recently marked by the addition of a new CEO. Yeah. So
Yep.
tell me a little bit about that. Like what went into the determination that you needed a new CEO? Was there any, was there sort of an inflection point around that hire? And tell me about the hire itself.
Sure. So we're incredibly excited to be working with George. So George Eliades joined us from Jazz. He was formerly Chief Transformation Officer and Head of Business Development at Jazz.
Mhm.
Brings a ton of experience in commercial launch, M&A, um, product strategy, etc. Um, so I think he's the right CEO to take what we have, which is some interesting proof of concept and a platform, and scale that into multi-product enduring oncology company. Um, you know, and yes, maybe I said he'll be doing that. He'll be leading the team to do that.
Yeah. Definitely leading the team. I mean, this is interesting to me as well. Like you're the chief scientific officer, chief
Yep,
science officer, scientific or science?
scientific. I think.
Scientific. Okay. I don't know if there's if there's anything different between those two words, if it's just semantics. But you're the founder and chief scientific officer. What um what kind of goes into the thinking around that? You got two founders. Say, okay, we're going to form up a company. Like you just hired a CEO who you think is going to be equipped probably better than you, to go do those, building oriented things. What goes into the thinking around like who's going to take what role when you found a company with a scientific background like yours?
I in my thinking, it's really about so to be clear, my co-founder Alex was CEO for a period of time and then transitioned out of the company about 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had that as sort of an open role, and then we had a search open, and then ended up hiring George, who we're fantastically excited about because he's really the right person.
Yeah.
In terms of picking roles at the from the get-go, um, we didn't have roles for the first year or two. We were just co-founders. And then I think in my thinking about how you pick roles, again, I would go back to something I said earlier, which is what's the role from which I can have the most impact on what we're doing? And for me, that was the science. I had a background in oncology from my PhD.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it was something I was uniquely strong at, and Alex had his own set of strengths that we ended up deciding he would go be CEO. So
Yeah. I was just curious, when you're forming things up, it's interesting, who's going to play what role. George, you said, is he right there in your world headquarters with you? You guys kind of in lockstep right now, like on the daily?
he is, yeah. So he's been here for 2 weeks, and then this week he's in SF packing up and moving.
Oh, very nice. Yeah. It was a 2 year period between Alex's departure and bringing George on.
Mhm.
Was that an active search the entire 2 years?
Yes.
And how did you go about like what were sort of the strategy and the keys to landing the right person?
Uh, I think looking for someone who was going to be the right kind of leader to lead the culture that we have and that we want to build, and then someone, um, maybe very secondarily to that, who had a set of skill sets that was complementary to our existing executive team. So
Mm.
we haven't talked about them yet, but or as much, but Sander, who's our chief operating officer, also does the COO thing, but also runs manufacturing for us. Had an incredible career in that, and very very skilled. And then Gilles Gallant, who's our chief development officer, comes to us from Daiichi Sankyo. Daiichi is the company that created Enhertu, which
Mhm.
probably kicked off the current ADC craze, as it were.
Yeah.
And Gilles was actually the program lead for Enhertu. So, um, that went well. And then he was promoted to head all of oncology clinical development at Daiichi, and then came to work with us.
Yeah. Yeah. Building an all-star team. My frequent guest, Alan Shaw, says, investors don't bet on horses, they bet on jockeys. And it sounds like you put a pretty good team of jockeys together there at Mythic.
Absolutely.
what's next? Who's next on your, I shouldn't say who, don't name names, but what role is next on Mythic's, I guess, hit list in terms of executive development or, for that matter, even scientific advance? Like, who do you need?
I think we have a pretty complete team right now. Um, you know, we are a private company. I would bet that at some point, we're already starting to think what it would take to become a public company. I don't think we're committed towards that path at all, but it's something you got to think about ahead of time. Um, you know, the thing that comes to mind is maybe there's a chief financial officer in the works if we decide to go down the public company route. But, right now Sandra's running finance and doing quite well at that. So
Yeah.
no immediate need there. And I think we're going to focus on onboarding George, working with him to figure out next steps in the next few months, and then build and grow from there.
Yeah. Any big next steps or inflection points on the horizon for the company on the whole? Obviously, this trial is probably keeping you pretty busy right now.
Yeah, it's an incredibly exciting time at Mythic. So we're wrapping up the dose escalation phase of our trial. It was done in unselected patients, which we know is not our patient population, but we learned a lot of things about safety, about PK, about dose, and some early signs of efficacy. We were also able to go fast. I mean, that was why we chose to go unselected to begin with, was to go fast, and we've achieved that. We've had incredible enrollment up to this point. And that's also a credit to the investigators and patients. Very thankful for them. And so there's that whole package of data that'll come together this year. There's also the package of data that we're going to use to motivate starting IND enabling work for our program 2. So I'm incredibly excited about that and what we're doing with program 2. And so from a data perspective, it's a good time to think about another financing. And with that financing, focus on getting into the dose expansion portion of our trial, funding a path to pivotal for the lead program, and then bringing that second program to IND.
Yeah. I'm assuming you've shared all that you're willing to share or can share about that second program.
For now, yes.
Okay. All right. I figured, but I had to ask.
Of course.
What haven't I asked you that I should have if I were a better interview, Brian?
It's been a fantastic interview. I think, maybe the message I would leave with, or that I would focus on is, again, we're a very different type of ADC company, focused on the antibody component. We're not a linker payload company. But we're hoping to stand on the shoulders of what's been done and what will be done on the linker payload side to have this very unique ability to deliver more to tumors and get a broader set of patients to respond so that we can replace chemo with something safer and with something more effective.
Yeah. All right. So I lied. I have one more question for you. Maybe I didn't lie. I don't think I said that was my last question, but you just brought up you brought up this point. We alluded to it earlier, the fact that like the ADC space has sort of exploded in recent months, if not like, a short number of years. It's only recently just kind of blown up. And because you just made sort of your final statement around, reiterating this idea that Mythic is a different ADC company with a different approach. What is your take on sort of the crowded landscape and cacophony of noise in the ADC space that's happening at this, very, very moment? What's your take on it? Like, is it good for Mythic in the industry? Is it challenging to be heard and noticed and seen and differentiated? Is there a bunch of noise out there that needs to be culled? Like, what are your general thoughts?
So I see two different things going on. One thing that's going on is for ADCs that have positive clinical proof of concept data, there are a lot of deals happening, and they're big deals. It's hard to find a deal that looks like that is less than $1 billion up front.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because ADCs can address large indications and they're highly manufacturable at this point, right? They're not a bespoke manufacturing process like, um, you know, cell and gene therapy, for example.
Yeah.
The other thing that's going on is more in the preclinical space, where there is a lot of, I don't know if to call it noise, but a lot of activity. But there, in the preclinical space, it's hard to find a deal with an upfront greater than about $50 million. The other piece, and thing that you have to think of is, with like a cell and gene therapy, particularly let's say cell therapy, when those deals were happening, in the last 5 years, very few larger companies could do cell therapy, right? And so they were looking for partners to bring in that as an expertise.
Mhm.
With something like an ADC, pharmas can do ADCs, right? They can make an ADC, they can make antibodies, and they can conjugate it to a payload. And so you have to bring something different, or you have to bring clinical data to the table. And I think that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to bring both. But I think that the preclinical space which is very frothy, is inherently capped. We're looking to sort of put that aside and take things to clinical POC where we can generate that hugely value inflecting data set.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Very good. I like that response. Thorough, honest assessment of the space and your role in it. Yeah, we got to wrap things up here. I've been abusing your time, Brian, but it's been a fascinating conversation. I appreciate you coming on and spending some time with us and giving us an update on Mythic. And we'll be paying attention. I hope to have you back on the show. Maybe once you've got some more data coming in from the clinical trial, maybe when you can share a little bit more on your second program. Because it's an exciting space, and your approach and the uniqueness of your approach is it's great fodder for the conversation. So thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. And we look forward to doing it again.
Thanks, Matt.